What is it about the paranormal that fascinates so many of us? We hear stories about ghosts, hauntings, and unexplainable events, things that don't make sense, things that can't be proven. And yet, there's always that lingering question, could it be real? Could there really be something beyond what we can see or understand? There's something unsettling about the unknown, about the idea that there may be forces out there, whether they're spirits or something else entirely, that we can't fully comprehend. People often talk about these things as if they were just stories, but every so often, someone will experience something that leaves them questioning everything they thought they knew. And the scariest part? The unanswered questions that remain, the things we can't explain, the unsettling feeling that something isn't quite right, even if no one else believes us. It's that uncertainty that lingers long after the event is over, that makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, what you saw, other could see too, to believe. Before we begin the story, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button and turn the bell notification on for future stories. My name is Scarlett, and I've never been one to believe in ghosts or any of that supernatural stuff. I've always thought it was just nonsense, something to entertain people or keep them up at night. But that night, the night Lily went missing, and what I saw afterward, well, it changed everything. It's been a few days since it happened, but I still can't stop thinking about it. I've tried to tell myself that it was just my imagination, that it was the stress, or maybe the dark playing tricks on me. But I know what I saw. I know what happened, and I can't shake it. It started out so normal. It was just a typical Saturday afternoon, Lily, and I spent the day together, running errands, having lunch, and even getting ice cream at the little parlor down the street. Lily had been asking to go to the park, and so I told her we could stop by for a little while before heading home. The park is just a short walk from our apartment, a small neighborhood playground with swings and slides, the kind of place where you let your kid run around for an hour and not worry. I remember it clearly. Lily had been playing on the swings, and I was sitting on the bench nearby, scrolling through my phone. It was such a nice day, and I was enjoying the rare peace. I had gotten a text from my mom about some family plans, and I decided to head home quickly to grab my purse. It only took me 5 minutes, I swear. It couldn't have been more than that. But when I came back to the park, she was gone. At first, I wasn't panicked. I thought maybe she had gone to the bathroom or wandered over to the ice cream truck near the entrance, so I called out for her. No answer. I scanned the playground. Nothing. It was empty, just the swings moving slightly in the breeze, the quiet sounds of the leaves rustling. I looked at my watch, thinking maybe I had just missed her. She had to be somewhere nearby, right? But the longer I searched, the more frantic I became. I asked people who were walking by if they'd seen a little girl in a pink hoodie. No one had. The park was still, almost too still. It wasn't like her to wander off, and something about the silence, it didn't sit right with me. My heart started to race. I called the police after about 30 minutes of searching. I told them that Lily had disappeared, and within an hour, a couple of officers arrived to help search. By this point, I was barely holding it together. I hadn't seen her anywhere. Not in the sandbox, not under the slides, not behind the big oak tree at the far end of the park. The police were calm, though, reassuring me that kids often wandered off for a little while. She's probably around somewhere, they said. She'll show up. But I knew something was wrong. It wasn't like Lily to just vanish without a trace. I couldn't sit still. I needed to keep searching. I couldn't just wait and hope. Not when the park was empty, not when she was nowhere to be found. By the time the sun began to set, the park had turned into a completely different place. The shadows grew longer, and the air felt cooler. I was starting to get scared now. It wasn't the usual empty feeling of dusk. It was more than that. It was like the entire park was holding its breath. I called Lily's name again and again, but there was still no answer. Every time I turned a corner, I hoped I would see her face, but nothing. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. Then, just as I was starting to panic, I heard something. It was a faint sound, like the wind moving through the trees. But it was too deliberate, too clear. And then there it was again. A faint creak of metal. I turned toward the swing set, and that's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was Lily. I swear to God, I thought it was her. I could barely see her face because her hair was hanging over it, but I saw the little figure sitting on the swing, her legs dangling lazily, the swing moving back and forth. My heart skipped a beat. Lily, I called out. My voice cracked, but it was a relief to think that I had found her. But as I walked closer, I realized something wasn't right. The child on the swing wasn't moving like Lily. She was still. Too still. Her small hands rested lightly on the ropes, and the swing creaked back and forth like it was being pushed by an invisible force. I froze. Lily, I said again, louder this time. But the child didn't respond. She didn't even turn her head. I could see her better now. The child on the swing had long, dark hair that hung limp and tangled around her face. She was wearing a white dress, something old-fashioned, like it belonged in a different time. Lily didn't wear dresses like that. I wanted to shake off the unease creeping up my spine, but I couldn't. Something was wrong. I stepped closer, my heart pounding, and I called out one more time, Lily, is that you? The swing groaned softly, moving back and forth. The air around me seemed to thicken, and the wind picked up, rustling the trees. But the child remained motionless. Her face was hidden under her hair. I took another step, then another. I was only a few feet away now. The feeling of wrongness was suffocating. That's when the child turned her head, slowly, and that's when I saw her face. It wasn't Lily. Her skin was pale, too pale. Her eyes were dark black, completely black. No white, no iris. Just endless darkness. I could see nothing but the void staring back at me, and my chest constricted with a sudden, overwhelming fear. Lily, I gasped. My voice was barely audible, shaking. The child didn't speak. She just stared at me, unmoving. But then, in the silence, I heard a voice. It wasn't Lily's. It wasn't even a child's voice. Not Lily, the voice whispered, barely more than a breath. I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the ground as I looked at the child, and the air felt colder, heavier. I felt like something was pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the child on the swing was gone. I blinked, my mind spinning. There was no one there. The swing creaked slightly, but it was empty. Suddenly, I heard a voice. Lily's voice. Mommy. I spun around. There, standing at the edge of the playground, was Lily. My heart nearly stopped. I ran to her, scooping her up in my arms, holding her tight. She was real. She was safe. Where were you? I asked, my voice cracking with relief and confusion. "Where did you go? I've been looking everywhere for you." Lily looked up at me, her expression puzzled. "I was at Sarah's house, Mummy. I told you I was going there. You must have forgotten." Sarah was our neighbor's daughter, a little girl from 2 buildings down. But I didn't remember Lily telling me she was going there. I tried to push the fear from my mind. Maybe I had missed it. Maybe I was just panicking. I turned back to the swing set, expecting to see the empty space, to confirm that what I'd seen was just my imagination. But the swing was still moving, slightly, as if it had been recently disturbed. I didn't tell Lily what I had seen. I didn't mention the black-eyed child or the whisper in the air. I just held her close, and we left the park. The police later found nothing. They couldn't explain the empty swing or the strange feeling I had. But they didn't know what I saw. They didn't know the terror that still lingers in my mind. Lily was found, safe and sound, and that's all anyone cares about. But I can't stop thinking about that moment in the park. I can't stop thinking about the child on the swing. Was it a trick of the light? Was it stress? Maybe. But I don't think so. I know what I saw. And I can't shake the feeling that something was trying to take her from me. I'll never forget that night, or the feeling of something watching, waiting. I was 12 years old, the summer that everything changed. The summer that I went from believing that ghosts were just stories told around campfires to knowing that some things just can't be explained. And even after all these years, even as an adult, I can't quite shake the memory. The park near our neighborhood wasn't much, just a few swings, a slide, and a big open field where kids played soccer or kicked around a ball. It wasn't the kind of place that gave you the chills, at least not until that night. My best friend Claire and I had spent countless hours there during the day. But it was always different at night. The shadows seemed longer, the trees more ominous, and there was a strange quiet that settled over everything. Most kids, even the teenagers, stayed away after dark. But not us. I don't know what drew us out that night. We had both just turned 12, and in that in-between stage we thought we were too old to be scared of things like darkness. We thought we were brave, and maybe we were in a way. But bravery doesn't always mean safety. That night was warm for October, and the moon hung high in the sky, casting a strange silver glow over everything. We had snuck out after our parents went to bed. The park was only a few blocks away, and it felt like a secret we shared. We didn't go often, but when we did, we would stay out late, pretending the world was ours to explore. As we walked down the quiet street toward the park, everything felt off. It was subtle at first. The air had a strange weight to it, like it was holding its breath. Claire noticed it too. I could tell by the way she kept glancing around, her steps a little quicker, like she wanted to get to the park faster. We joked about being grown-ups, trying to convince ourselves that it was just nerves, but there was something in the air that neither of us could shake. We reached the park, and as always, the swings were swaying slightly in the breeze. The moonlight cast long shadows across the playground, making it look like a scene from a movie, a place where anything could happen. We had our flashlights with us, though the beams of light seemed weak against the overwhelming dark. "I dare you to go sit on the swings," Claire said, her voice teasing. I laughed, but I could feel my heartbeat quicken as I walked toward the swing set. It wasn't fear, exactly, just an odd sense of unease that hung in the air. The swings creaked under the weight of the night. "Come on, "You chicken," Claire said from behind me. "I bet you won't last a minute." I sat on the swing, trying to push the odd sensation away, the feeling that we were being watched. But the wind had died down, and the park was disturbingly quiet, too quiet. Claire followed me, sitting on the swing next to me. She pushed off the ground, and soon we were both moving in the dark, our feet barely skimming the gravel. The sound of our laughter was the only noise until it wasn't. I remember exactly when it happened, the exact moment when the world seemed to shift. The air grew colder. The swings, which had been moving gently, suddenly stopped, as if the wind had stopped altogether. And that's when we heard it. A sound, a faint, dragging noise coming from the edge of the park near the trees. The kind of sound that didn't belong. It was slow, like something heavy being dragged across the ground. Neither of us spoke at first. We both froze, our laughter dying in our throats. The sound grew louder. It was coming closer. "Do you hear that?" Claire whispered. I nodded, but the words felt stuck in my throat. There was something wrong, something about the sound that didn't make sense. It wasn't the usual noises of animals or the wind, it was deliberate, and it was coming closer. Then, from the darkness, a figure appeared. At first, it was just a shadow, a shape moving between the trees, blending with the night. But as it came into the light, I saw it clearly. A woman. She was standing at the edge of the park, near the line of trees. She was tall, with long, dark hair that hung around her face in loose waves. But what stood out the most, what haunted me even before I realized what was happening, was her clothes. They were old-fashioned, a long black dress that looked out of place, like it belonged in another time. She stood motionless, staring at us. Claire gasped, and I turned to look at her, my stomach sinking. We both knew something was wrong. "Who is that?" Claire whispered, her voice shaking. I couldn't answer her. I couldn't move. I was frozen, staring at the figure, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The woman didn't move, didn't even blink. It was as though she was made of stone, like she was waiting. Then, without warning, she started walking toward us. We both stood up at the same time, panic gripping our chests. We didn't speak, just turned and ran as fast as we could, not daring to look back. The sound of our shoes hitting the gravel was deafening in the still night, but the dragging noise behind us, the noise that had started it all, grew louder. It felt like hours before we finally reached the gate. My legs burned, and my chest ached from running, but when I turned to look, I saw the woman still following us, moving slowly but steadily, her dark eyes locked on us. Her feet didn't seem to touch the ground. We finally burst through the gate and into the street, not stopping until we were several blocks away, gasping for breath. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, desperately trying to call my mom. But the phone just buzzed with no signal. It was like the whole world had gone quiet. When we finally reached Claire's house, we collapsed on her porch, hearts pounding. We didn't speak for a long time. What was there to say? There was no explanation, no logic that could make sense of what we'd seen. Just the image of that woman, walking toward us in that impossible way, her eyes dark and unblinking. And we never spoke of it again. But that's the thing, isn't it? When you see something like that, something that's so utterly inexplicable, it leaves a mark on you. And no matter how many years go by, no matter how much time passes, you can't forget it. I've tried. I really have. I've tried to convince myself that it was just a trick of the mind, some weird combination of shadows, and the way the moonlight filtered through the trees. But deep down, I know the truth. That woman was real. It's been almost 15 years since that night. I am an adult now with a life of my own, but I still can't walk past that park without feeling that same familiar chill creeping up my spine. I don't know what we saw that night, whether it was a ghost or something else, or just our imagination running wild. But Claire and I, we both know it wasn't something we made up. That park, the one that once felt so familiar, is now a place I avoid. It's funny how quickly a place can go from feeling like a second home to something utterly terrifying. I never went back to that park after that night. Claire didn't either, and to this day, neither of us has ever been able to explain what happened or why it's still with us. That feeling, that dread. But every time I walk by the park, every time I see those swings swaying in the wind, I'm reminded of that night, and I wonder, will I ever truly understand what we saw? Or is there a part of the world, a dark and twisted corner, that we're just not meant to know about?